Representative Weatherford, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. Speaker Designate of the Florida House of Representatives. Congratulations, and do you believe it?
I do now, but no, it's a tremendous honor to have the chance. It's a tremendous honor to serve the public in any capacity, but to be a legislator and then get an opportunity to serve as Speaker of the House really is a dream come true.
When did you first begin to have a dream like this?
Well, I started getting involved in politics in college, and I was playing football at a small school called Jacksonville University, and I had an opportunity to run for the Senate, for the school Senate, and represent one of those seats and the freshman class, and I thought it may be something fun to do, and as I got into it and I realized the impact I could have on campus, I became more and more engaged, and so I stayed involved in kind of school politics throughout my tenure at Jacksonville University, and that was really my first foray. But I always enjoyed it. I always enjoyed reading about it. I come from a family that whereas my parents were not politically active, they cared a lot, and they made sure that their children cared a lot about the political process and that we understood the importance of it.
Well, let's talk about that family for a minute. It's an impressive family.
It's a big family.
It's a big family, and it certainly sounded impressive in your designation speech. Your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, they all had a big impact on you individually and together. Let's walk through it a minute. Let's talk about your mom and your dad, and let's try to relate it to your political career. I know they touched you greatly personally, but what about your mom impacted you in terms of your career right now?
Well, my mom probably had as big of impact as any mother can have on her children. I come from a family of 9 children, so obviously you have to spread the wealth a little bit when you have 9 kids and you can't put all your focus on one. But my mother chose to do something at a time in the 80s that was very rare, which was she homeschooled us all through the 6th grade. And she decided that she wanted to have an impact in my education as a young man. And she dedicated every day of her life to making sure that the education I was receiving was going to give me a foundation to go on. And not until now that I have my own children, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old, am I starting to realize the true sacrifice that she put forth for me and for the rest of my brothers and sisters. And so we're very close. She's an extremely bright woman. Anyone who has the courage to try to homeschool 9 children through the 6th grade really is amazing. And she was just an amazing woman. There's not enough I could ever probably do to repay her or tell her how much I love her, but she had a huge impact on my life.
Okay, your dad.
My dad is just a guy who woke up every day and knew that he had to provide for his family. I used to ask my dad, "Hey Dad, what are you doing next week?" And he would always joke, and he'd multiply the amount of kids he had in his house times 3 meals a day, and he'd say, "Well, I've got to put 247 meals on the table next week, so that's what I'm doing." And his focus was providing for his family, being an example to his young sons, and providing for his daughters, and was really a person who also contributed to our education as young people. He originally grew up in Dallas. We moved to Florida from Dallas in 1986 when I was a young man. And he's just been a great inspiration and mentor to me. And again, to have that many children, to have an impact like they've had on that many children, and to be someone who has kind of always been an encourager for me, it's just been a blessing.
It is a blessing. Okay, 8 siblings. You lost one that you mentioned in your designation speech, your younger brother. But your siblings have a big impact on you. I know they do, and that many have a big impact. You had to learn some politics in that family, didn't you?
Well, yeah, every meal was like a city council meeting, you know what I mean? I mean, it was just, when you have 8 siblings, and competition, of course, is involved in everything you do. We competed in academics, we competed in athletics. Myself and all my brothers have all played college football somewhere, and so sports was what we did, and so it was a very competitive environment. But politics was there too. You're always trying to work. Who's going to get the most money? Yeah, who's going to get the most money out of Dad? And there was always a bartering system. I'll trade you this baseball card for that ball cap or whatnot. And so you learn politics really quickly in my family. And most of my brothers are younger than mine, so as I've joked with you before, up until about 10 years ago, I could whip most of them. But now my brothers are a lot bigger than me, so I don't think I can do that anymore. But it was really a lot of fun growing up in that environment. And you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about dealing with people when you have to share a bunk bed and another bed all in one room with 2 brothers.
Well, you have another relative, a grandmother, who is a Democrat, and a prominent Democrat. in the state of Arizona. I think I read she might have run for governor or something in that state.
My grandmother's name's Carolyn Warner. She was actually what she's called the Secretary of Education for 12 years, which was the equivalent of the elected education commissioner in Florida. And so she's an education guru, ran for governor in 1986, barely lost the general election. She won the primary. In fact, the guy that ended up beating her, I won't mention his name, but he ended up getting impeached about a year into the race, a year after the race. And so that was an interesting dynamic. But my grandmother is a tremendous orator. She's a wonderful person. She's been a counselor to me for years and years. Probably, if you had to go back to a single moment and said, when did you really get interested in politics? It was when I was a young man, probably 6 or 7 years old, going over to Arizona to help knock on doors for her as she was running for governor. And it never made an impact on me as a young person, never forgot it. And she's always made sure I understood the importance of public service. And so just a wonderful woman and a great honor that I'm related to her.
Fantastic. Well, there's another person very important in your life in a couple of respects. He's your father-in-law, and he gave you a great gift there.
Yes, he did.
Along with his wife, and that would be your wife. And he's also been a Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives. That would, of course, be Alan Bentz, Republican from Panama City. And you worked for him, didn't you?
I did. I started off working for him before I was dating his daughter, Courtney, although I'll get into that in a second. But Alan Bentz was someone that I met when I was in college. I actually played football with his son, Jason, and that was how we first met. But he was a tremendous speaker. And if you really look back in history of the speakers of Florida, you have to rank him up there in the top 2 or 3, certainly. He's my number 1, but I'm probably a little bit biased. But I think everyone universally respects Alan Bentz because he was a man of integrity, he was a person of character, he was a man who was fair. And so having a chance to work in his speaker's office and be a part of the process up close and personal was a great benefit to me. About a year into that, I started dating his daughter, Courtney, with his permission, of course, and that has now blossomed to be, she's now my wife of 5 years. We have 2 beautiful daughters, and so Alan Bentz has been just a wonderful friend, a wonderful mentor, and I almost feel like it's cheating to have a father-in-law who was a speaker, just in recent history, knowing that I'm getting ready to go into the same thing. To have someone you can pick up the phone and call and ask for advice, it's absolutely priceless.
Let me ask you this. Most of the people who were passionate politically when I was coming along were liberal, liberal to radical even. This was in the 60s. A lot of the people that I know today who are involved in politics in Florida, around your age, plus or minus a few years, who are passionate, are more conservative. Tell me about when you really realized you were a conservative in your heart and what that means to you.
Well, it's a very good question, and I've got a very simple answer. It really started in my education in the home. Part of the reason that my mother wanted to homeschool us was because she wanted us to have an understanding and a foundation as to how this country was created. And in the documents that help found this country, when it talks about things like having inalienable rights, and that means that our rights come from God and not from our government, and making sure that personal liberties and making sure that government's intrusion on our lives is limited, and making sure that we're not taxed to death, and all those things. I started looking at the founding documents. How was this country created? Why was it created? What was so different about this place they called America? And when you look at those ideals, I believe them to be the same ideals that the Republican Party stands for today. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we're always right and the Democrats are always wrong. I certainly think that they bring some great ideas and values to the table. But when I look at my value set, and I look at the Republican Party's value set, and I look at where this country started, I think they're aligned. And so my education as a child and those homeschooled years and learning from my mother and learning where this country came from, that probably had the biggest impact on me and my conservative roots.
Well, okay, how did that upbringing and so forth stand you when you talked to your grandmother?
Yeah, well,
she's a Democrat. What did she think about that? When
my mother first told my grandmother that I was a Republican, she asked her if she dropped me on my head when I was a baby. That must have been the only reason for it. But I'll tell you, my grandmother, she's a conservative Democrat. Probably she's from Arizona, but if she lived in the Southeast, you'd probably call her a blue dog. And she's a very, very practical person. And I think we get so caught up in Democrat and Republican, we sometimes forget that what people really want is leadership. They want people who are making decisions that are in the best interest of their children and their grandchildren and the future of this country. And I think that's what I hope I stand for, that more than anything. I'm very proud to be a Republican. I carry the flag, but I carry the flag of the state of Florida higher, and I carry the flag of the United States of America higher. Those are the most important things, and making sure we represent those ideals above and beyond any political party.
Let's go to break. We'll come back and look at some excerpts from your speech.
Sounds good.